They'll push you away like you're nothing, like you'll always return, like your love is guaranteed. So don't chase, don't beg, don't explain, just disappear with dignity. Because the moment you stop coming back, the moment your energy is gone, your access is gone, your silence is real, that's when they collapse. Not because you hurt them, but because they finally feel the cost of losing you. You need to hear this in a way that lands in your chest, because when someone pushes you away, your mind instantly turns it into a verdict about you. You start thinking you were too intense, too emotional, too needy, too much, and you replay every message, every moment, every little reaction, as if love is a test you failed. But the truth is far more human than that. When an avoidant pulls back, it is rarely because you are unworthy of closeness. It is because closeness wakes up something in them that they don't know how to hold. They can enjoy you, they can miss you, they can even crave you, and still panic when your presence starts to feel like real intimacy. Because intimacy asks for consistency, vulnerability, accountability, and those are the exact places where their fear lives. So they do what they've always done. They create distance, they delay, they go quiet, they turn warm into cold, and you feel it like a door shutting on your heart. And what makes it so painful is that you can feel the connection, you can feel the chemistry, you can feel the potential, but you cannot feel safety, because safety requires someone to stay, not someone to disappear the moment you get close enough to matter. And because you care, you try to adapt, you tell yourself you'll be more patient, you'll be more relaxed, you'll be less serious, you'll ask for less, you'll expect less, you'll keep it light, you'll become easier to keep. And slowly, without realizing it, you start shrinking. You start editing your feelings before you speak. You start swallowing questions that are completely normal. You start acting like you don't need reassurance. You start dressing your needs in jokes. You start pretending you're fine with half effort because you're terrified that if you ask for what you really want, they'll run again. But listen, this is where your heart has to become honest with you. Love is not something you should have to water down to keep. If the only way someone can tolerate you is when you are quiet, if the only way someone can stay is when you make yourself small, that is not a relationship. That is an emotional compromise where you pay the price again and again with your peace. Your feelings are not too much. Your desire for clarity is not a burden. Your need for consistency is not a flaw. Those are signs you are emotionally alive, and you are asking for the kind of love that doesn't require you to abandon yourself to be chosen. Because what's actually happening when an avoidant pushes you away is not that you are failing, it is that they are coping. They are coping with a nervous system that associates closeness with danger. They are coping with an old story that says, if I let someone in, I lose control. They are coping with the fear of being seen, the fear of being needed, the fear of disappointing you, the fear of being responsible for your feelings. And instead of learning how to stay present, they use distance as their refuge. And here is the trap. The more you chase, the more you explain, the more you try to prove you're safe, the more you accidentally teach them that their coping strategy works. Because they get relief without consequence. They get space without accountability. They get to reset the relationship whenever it becomes emotionally real. Meanwhile, you're the one carrying the emotional weight. You're the one doing the repair work. You're the one staying awake at night trying to make sense of a silence that has no explanation. That dynamic can make you start believing that if you just become perfect, you'll finally be loved properly. But love is not something you earn by performing. Love is something you receive when someone is capable of giving it. So the most important shift you can make is this: stop translating their distance into your value. Their pulling away is not proof that you are unlovable. It is proof that they are uncomfortable with love that asks them to show up. And this is where your self-respect becomes sacred, because you can have compassion for their fear without volunteering your heart as the place they practice avoidance. You can understand their past without making it your present. You can love them and still refuse to be the person who teaches them that pushing you away is safe. Real love does not require you to keep returning to the scene of your own neglect. Real love does not ask you to tolerate confusion as the cost of connection. Real love does not make you feel like you're asking for too much when you're asking for the bare minimum. If someone cannot hold your feelings gently, If they punish your closeness with distance, if they only stay when you detach, then what they are offering is not partnership, it's proximity on their terms, and your heart deserves more than a relationship that only works when you betray your needs. And I know it hurts, because you don't just miss them. You miss the version of you that believed it could become something beautiful. You miss the late night talks, the tenderness, the hope, the moments when they seemed present, and you wonder if you should have waited longer, been softer, asked differently, loved harder. But the truth is, the right love does not require you to contort yourself into silence. The right love doesn't make you question your reality every time their mood changes. The right love doesn't punish you for wanting closeness. So let this be the moment you stop calling yourself too much for having a heart, and you start calling their behavior what it is: emotional unavailability disguised as independence. Let this be the moment you place your worth back in your own hands, not in their replies, not in their consistency, not in their sudden bursts of affection, but in the quiet knowing that you are allowed to want a love that stays. You are allowed to be fully yourself without fear of being abandoned for it. You are allowed to take up space, to have needs, to ask for reassurance, to want clarity, to want someone who doesn't make you feel guilty for desiring connection. And you are allowed to walk away from anything that asks you to shrink to be kept, because you were never too much. You were simply asking the wrong person to meet you at the depth you were already willing to give. There comes a point where your heart gets tired of running in circles, not because you stopped loving them, not because you suddenly became cold, but because you finally see the pattern clearly, and the pattern is this: you keep reaching for someone who keeps staying just out of reach. You keep offering warmth to someone who answers with distance. You keep asking for clarity and getting confusion. You keep trying to talk and they keep finding a way to disappear. And every time they disappear, you tell yourself, just one more message, just one more chance, just one more conversation, and they'll finally understand. But listen to me. The moment you stop chasing clarity from someone who survives by staying unclear is the moment your power returns, because your peace is not a prize you earn, it is a standard you protect. And I know why you chase, because uncertainty feels unbearable when you care deeply. When you love, you want to repair, you want to fix, you want to know where you stand, you want to know if you're safe. You want a simple answer to a simple question: are you in this with me or not? But the avoidant dynamic keeps you hovering in the middle, not fully together, not fully apart, just enough to keep your hope alive, just enough to keep you invested, just enough to make you question yourself. And that space is brutal because it turns you into a person who checks their phone too often, who rereads messages too many times, who overthinks the tone of a sentence, who feels their stomach drop when hours go by, and who starts measuring their worth in response time. That is not love. That is anxiety dressed up as devotion, and it drains the life out of you. Because when someone is committed to being unclear, they do not experience your questions as an invitation to build, they experience your questions as pressure. And instead of meeting you with honesty, they give you vagueness, they give you half promises, they give you, I don't know, they give you, let's see, they give you warmth one day and cold the next, and it keeps you hooked because your brain starts chasing the high of the good moments. You start thinking, if I can just get them back to that version again, then we'll be okay. But that version is not a foundation, it's a spike. It's not stability, it's a surge. And your nervous system is not meant to live on surges, your heart is meant to live on safety. So the second key shift is not just about walking away, it's about what you do inside yourself when you don't get the answer you want. It's about how you respond when they don't respond. It's about how you treat yourself when they keep you waiting. Because the person you become in that waiting room matters. And if you keep chasing, you keep sending paragraphs, you keep asking for reassurance, you keep pleading for clarity, you slowly teach yourself the most dangerous lesson: that your peace is something you have to earn from another person. And that is the moment you lose your center, because you start outsourcing your emotional stability to someone who cannot even manage their own. Here is what power actually looks like. Power is not harsh. It is not loud. It is not revenge. It is not acting like you don't care. Power is calm. It is self-respecting. It is quietly decisive. Power is you noticing the pattern, naming it, and refusing to participate in it anymore. Power is you saying, I am no longer going to chase answers from someone who benefits from my confusion. Power is you realizing that if someone wants you, they don't make you guess. If someone values you, they don't keep you in limbo. If someone is emotionally available, you don't need to interpret them like a puzzle. You simply feel them, clearly, consistently, and safely. And yes, it will feel strange at first because you are used to the chase. Your body is used to the adrenaline of uncertainty. Your mind is used to the constant maybe. When you stop chasing, you might feel withdrawal. You might feel the urge to send that one message, the urge to explain again, the urge to ask again, the urge to fix again, because your heart is terrified that if you don't do something, you will lose them. But listen carefully. If your only way to keep someone is to abandon your dignity, that is not keeping them. That is losing yourself. You are not here to beg for basics. You are not here to audition for someone's commitment. You are not here to perform emotional labor in exchange for crumbs. You can love someone and still refuse to live in uncertainty. You can miss someone and still choose silence. You can want them and still choose your dignity. Because there's a difference between love and attachment. Love is grounded. Love is steady. Love is mutual. Attachment, when it becomes anxious, turns into this feeling of, if I don't do something right now, I will be abandoned. And that fear will make you chase someone who is not even running toward you. That fear will make you compromise your needs, your standards, your boundaries, just to keep a connection alive that only survives because you keep resuscitating it. So I want you to practice a new sentence, and I want you to say it like you mean it. I will not negotiate for what should be freely given. I will not chase someone into emotional distance. I will not beg for clarity. I will not keep explaining my worth to someone who keeps questioning it with their actions. And I know your heart might say, but what if they don't come back? And here is the answer that will set you free. If they only come back when you chase, then they were never truly choosing you. They were choosing the comfort of being wanted. They were choosing the security of your effort. They were choosing the benefit of your devotion without the responsibility of showing up. And your peace is too expensive for that. Because you deserve the kind of love where you don't have to calculate every move, where you don't have to keep the connection alive alone, where you don't have to carry the relationship on your back like it's your job. You deserve a love that meets you halfway without you having to beg for the road to be built. You deserve someone who doesn't punish your emotions with silence, someone who doesn't call your needs drama, someone who doesn't make you feel like you're asking for too much when you're asking for the bare minimum. And the way you start receiving that love is not by chasing harder, it's by raising your standard and honoring it, even when it hurts. So if they stay unclear, let that be clear. If they avoid the conversation, let that be your answer. If they give you mixed signals, let that be your closure. Not because you are giving up, but because you are finally choosing yourself. You are finally saying, I will not live in a love that requires me to lose my peace. And when you stop chasing clarity, something incredible happens. You stop spinning, you stop begging, you stop shrinking, you stop waiting for someone else to decide your value, and you come back to yourself, steady, grounded, whole, and that is where your real power has been all along. There is a goodbye that people talk about like it's dramatic, like it's screaming and blocking and slamming doors, but the goodbye that changes your life is rarely loud. The goodbye that breaks the spell is quiet. It's the moment you stop explaining, stop defending, stop waiting for the next wave of warmth that will be followed by another cold disappearance. It's the moment you realize that you have been surviving on crumbs, calling them love, and telling your heart to be grateful for the bare minimum. And when you finally accept that love cannot be built on crumbs, you don't need a big speech. You don't need a final argument. You don't need to prove your pain. You simply walk away without slamming the door, just closing it. Gently, firmly, and for the first time, choosing your dignity over your hope. Because hope can be a beautiful thing, but hope can also become a trap when it's tied to someone's inconsistency. And in an avoidant dynamic, Hope is what keeps you stuck. Hope is what keeps you reading into their small gestures. Hope is what keeps you believing that the good moments mean the future will be different. Hope is what keeps you tolerating behavior you would never accept from someone you weren't emotionally attached to. You start living in memories instead of reality. You start loving their potential instead of their pattern. You start forgiving what hasn't changed because you keep thinking they're trying, when the truth is, you are trying. You are the one carrying the emotional weight. You are the one making the relationship possible. And that is why this goodbye hurts so much, because you're not only letting go of them, you're letting go of the future you kept building in your head. You're letting go of the version of them you kept hoping would show up consistently. You're letting go of the fantasy that if you just loved them a little better, they would finally feel safe enough to stay. But listen, your love was never the problem. Your love was not too weak. Your patience was not insufficient. Your loyalty was not lacking. The problem is that you cannot love someone into emotional availability. You cannot heal someone's fear by sacrificing yourself. You cannot earn consistency from someone who only offers it when it's convenient. And when you start to see this, your heart begins to grieve, not just the person, but the effort you invested, the nights you stayed up overthinking, the moments you swallowed your needs, the times you pretended you were fine, the times you apologized just to keep peace, the times you accepted silence as normal. That grief is real, and it deserves respect, because it's the grief of realizing you were building something with someone who kept leaving the construction site. And the quiet goodbye begins long before you actually leave. It begins the day you stop begging for basic reassurance. It begins the day you stop chasing someone who keeps stepping back. It begins the day you stop sending paragraphs to someone who answers with one-word replies. It begins the day you stop arguing for a relationship that should not require arguments to exist. It begins the day you look at your own life and realize that you are not okay, not because you're weak, but because you've been living in emotional whiplash and your nervous system is exhausted. You're tired of the guessing. You're tired of the uncertainty. You're tired of feeling like you have to be perfect to be kept. You're tired of being loved in bursts instead of being loved in a steady way that makes you feel safe. And here is the hard truth. The longer you stay in crumbs, the more you start to forget what a full meal feels like. You start thinking that anxiety is chemistry. You start thinking that inconsistency is excitement. You start thinking that your pain is proof that it matters. But pain is not proof of love. Pain is proof that something is not working. Love that is right for you does not constantly put you in a position where you are questioning your worth. Love that is right for you does not make you feel like you're always on the edge of being abandoned. Love that is right for you does not require you to keep losing yourself just to keep them. So the quiet goodbye is an act of self-respect. It is you saying, I'm done negotiating my needs. It is you saying, I'm done making my heart small. It is you saying, I'm done confusing potential with reality. And yes, there will be moments when your heart screams, when you miss them so much it feels like you can't breathe, when you want to send that message just to feel close again, when you want to reopen the door just to stop the ache. But that ache is not always love. Sometimes it is withdrawal. Sometimes it is your attachment system trying to pull you back into what's familiar, even if it's painful, because familiarity can feel safer than the unknown. And that is why you need something deeper than emotion in the moment. You need a decision. You need a boundary. You need a promise to yourself that you will not return to what keeps breaking you. And I want you to understand something. Walking away quietly does not mean you didn't care. It doesn't mean you gave up too soon. It doesn't mean you were cold. It means you finally listened to the part of you that has been whispering for a long time, this isn't enough, because your heart knows, your body knows, your sleep knows, your peace knows. You feel it in the tension, in the overthinking, in the constant need to monitor their mood, in the way you feel relief when they finally give you attention, and then panic when they disappear again. That is not the love story you deserve. The quiet goodbye is you choosing a love that doesn't require you to chase. The quiet goodbye is you choosing a future where you don't feel anxious when you speak your needs. The quiet goodbye is you making room for someone who can actually meet you, not halfway for a week, but consistently, with emotional presence, with honesty, with warmth. that doesn't vanish. And if you're afraid that leaving means you'll be alone, remember this: you've already been alone in the relationship. You've been alone in your questions, alone in your feelings, alone in the effort. The difference is that when you leave, you stop being alone while pretending you're not. So close the door gently, not with anger, but with clarity, not with insults, but with boundaries, not with chaos, but with calm. Let the last thing you give yourself be respect. Let the last thing you offer your heart be protection. Because the quiet goodbye is not the end of your love, it is the beginning of your healing. And the day you stop accepting crumbs is the day you start remembering what you are truly worth. When you imagine them collapsing, I need you to understand what that really means. It is not some cinematic moment where they finally suffer and you finally win. It is not revenge. It is not you standing over them with a cold smile and saying, "Now you know how I felt." No, the collapse you're thinking about is something much quieter, much more human, and much more painful than that. It is consequence. It is the moment a person finally has to sit with the reality they have been running from, because the one person who always returned, the one person who always softened, the one person who always reached back across the distance, is no longer coming to save the connection. And that is where the truth begins, because for so long, your love was the cushion, your effort was the bridge, your patience was the excuse they used to avoid changing. You kept making the relationship survivable for someone who didn't know how to be consistent. You need to see the pattern for what it is. Every time they pulled away, you felt the panic rise. You felt the urgency to fix it. You felt that instinct to prove you were safe, to prove you weren't asking for too much, to prove you could be easy, and in that moment, you would reach. You would check in. You would send the message. You would offer peace. You would do the emotional labor of reconnecting, and they learned something from that. Not because they're evil, not because they planned it, but because this is how patterns work. They learned that distance has no cost. They learned that silence doesn't end the relationship, it simply resets it. They learned that when closeness feels overwhelming, they can withdraw, and you will still be there on the other side, still caring, still trying, still making it okay. And the tragedy is, you didn't do this because you were weak, you did it because you loved, you did it because you believed in the good, you did it because you thought patience could create safety. But patience without boundaries doesn't create safety. It creates permission. It teaches someone that your heart will tolerate what your soul is quietly begging you to stop accepting. So when you finally don't come back, the first thing that happens is not collapse, it's relief. Yes, relief. Because distance is their comfort zone, it's their coping mechanism, it's the place where they feel in control. When you stop reaching, the pressure lifts, the intensity disappears, and they tell themselves, this is fine. They distract themselves. They stay busy. They scroll. They work. They laugh with friends. They look okay on the surface. And if you're watching from the outside, that part can break you because you're thinking, how can they look so fine while I'm barely holding myself together? But you are not watching the whole story. You are watching the first stage, the stage where the nervous system celebrates the escape. The collapse doesn't begin in the first quiet. It begins when the quiet stops, feeling like freedom, and starts feeling like emptiness. Because emptiness has a sound. It shows up late at night when the distractions end. It shows up in the tiny moments when they reach for their phone out of habit and there is nothing. It shows up when something good happens and they feel that impulse to share it, and then they remember they don't have access to you anymore. It shows up when something hard happens and they feel the weight of facing it alone, and they realize they can't just appear and disappear and expect comfort to still be waiting. It shows up when the room is quiet and there is no one to absorb their moods, no one to smooth out the awkwardness, no one to bring warmth back into the space. And that's when consequence arrives, not as punishment, but as reality. Because reality is what happens when your effort is no longer filling the gaps they created. And here is what most people don't understand. The avoidant doesn't only miss you, they miss the version of themselves they got to be around you, the version that felt cared for without having to risk too much, the version that could receive without fully reciprocating, the version that could keep one foot out the door and still be loved. They miss the comfort of your patience, the safety of your forgiveness, the certainty that even if they pushed, you would pull. They miss the emotional labor you provided, the way you translated silence into understanding, the way you accepted half explanations, the way you gave them time that cost you your peace. And when that disappears, they are left with something they hate, a mirror.